welcome to the TDWI webinar program. I'm Andrew Miller, and I'll be your moderator. For today's program, we're going to have an expert panel on what's ahead in data management for 2023. And our sponsors today are Hitachi Vantara, SAP, and Unravel Data. For our presentations today, we'll hear first from James Kobielus with TDWI. And after Jim speaks, we'll be joined by Madhup Mishra with Hitachi Vantara, Colin Dover with SAP, and Chris Santiago with Unravel Data for a panel discussion. Before I turn over the time to our speakers, I'd like to go over a few basics. Today's webinar will be about an hour long, and at the end of the presentations, our speakers will host a question and answer period. If at any time during these presentations you'd like to submit a question, just use the Ask a Question area on your screen to type in your question. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, please click on the Help area located below the slide window, and you'll receive technical assistance. If you'd like to discuss this webinar on Twitter with fellow attendees, just include the hashtag TDWI in your tweets. And finally, if you'd like a copy of today's presentation, use the Click Here for a PDF line there in the left middle of your console. In addition, we are recording today's event, and we'll be emailing you a link to an archived version so you can view the presentation again later if you choose, or if you'd like to share with a colleague. Again, today we're going to be discussing what's ahead in data management for 2023. And our first speaker is James Kobielus, the Senior Director of Research for Data Management at TDWI. Jim is a veteran thought leader, industry analyst, consultant, author, and speaker on analytics and data management. And over the past 3 decades, Jim has held analyst positions at Futurum Research, Wikibon, Forrester Research, Current Analysis, and the Burton Group. He also served as Senior Program Director, Product Marketing for Big Data Analytics for IBM, where he was both a subject matter expert and strategist on thought leadership and content marketing programs targeted at the data science community. At TDWI, Jim focuses on data management, which encompasses database platforms, data governance, data integration, master data management, data ops pipelines, and more. Please welcome Jim, and with that, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you today. And, looking ahead to the coming new year, 2023, oh my gosh, as a data management and analytics industry, we've undergone so much change in just the last few years through the lockdown, the whole pandemic period, the recovery from all of that. And there's more turbulence ahead, almost certainly, but we can see, and we do see, the broad outlines for evolution, the trends that are changing how data management is conducted in the enterprise. And our 3 panelists have plenty of insight, being industry players par excellence who I know have a lot to say. So TDWI, we, of course, have been in the data management and analytics industry for a fairly long time. In our research, we do more than annual, we do regular survey research of practitioners, ask them what's going on in their organizations, what challenges do they face in using data and analytics to run the business. So what we did this year, 2022, which is, of course, we are now in the 12th month of, coming to a close, what we did is what we do every year. We ask in a formal, structured survey of the market of practitioners, what is the primary motivation for evolving your organization's data strategy? And you can see the high-level results in terms of how they responded, the practitioners who responded to the survey. And far and away, the respondents cited the primary motivation being to support modern analytics, to modernize their analytics, to run the analytics, to run the business more effectively by having new types of analytics deployed into new types of data-driven decisioning and process management scenarios and the like. So modern analytics is very much the enterprise primary motivation for evolving data strategy, correcting existing problems with data, supporting scalability to support growing volumes and workloads is surely important, likewise cost reduction and so forth. But first and foremost, modernizing analytics. When we asked in that, we asked in that same survey, I'll get it right in just a moment here, excuse me. There you go. What are the top challenges that you have faced managing your data in the cloud? We asked them what are the top challenges, the top 3. And the number 1 top challenge that data management professionals are facing is data integration across increasingly hybridized environments of many different types of data platforms, SQL and NoSQL and the like, and disparate data, but also governance of all this disparate data across increasingly complex cloud environments was cited as the top challenges. And really, when we look at the other responses, it's clear that, you know, the subtext is that managing data is becoming increasingly distributed, heterogeneous, and being deployed across multiple domains in the business is the core challenge for enterprises. It's getting exceptionally complex, and how do we unify the access to, the management of, and governance and development of data-driven applications in a way that simplifies it so that organizations can do it in a more repeatable fashion with greater transparency. When we asked in the same survey, what architectures you consider to be the future of data management, once again, we're talking to data professionals here. What was clear when talking to them is that, first of all, the future of data management is multi-platform environments that involve SQL and NoSQL and various types of NoSQL platforms, each with their own uses, whether they be key value stores or document databases or graph databases and so forth. But also these both data at rest and data in motion streaming data platforms. Multi-platform environments have become mainstream in the enterprise, and increasingly they are cloud platforms. So much of what TDWI is seeing now in terms of the enterprise initiatives in data management, much of it is migration of legacy data to the cloud, to cloud environments that are themselves becoming far more complex, multi-cloud. As you can see in the middle bar here, we asked the respondents indicated that increasingly this cloud environment is becoming more multi-cloud in orientation, with the public and private clouds playing together. And any number of solution providers on the market provide not only the underlying cloud platforms, but also the tools for managing data and analytics and governing it all across multi-cloud environments. When we, in terms of the future of data management, data fabric, virtualized data fabrics are very much part of the future as perceived by the respondents, as perceived and seen by TDWI. In terms of the data management environment in the cloud is increasingly virtualized behind an abstraction layer that enables unified management and governance and optimization of disparate data. Now, the respondents indicated that data mesh, which TDWI defines as a distributed domain-specific environment that enables essentially federation of different data domains with a common approach for data integration and governance, is coming along, but has not yet achieved takeoff velocity in terms of at least the awareness of the need to go to more of a radically distributed, decentralized data mesh architecture. But over time, that is clearly changing as we see more mature solutions and approaches on the market for managing data across distributed multi-domain and really B2B meshes. So when we look at the years ahead at TDWI in terms of what's ahead in data management, well, new data platform architectures, clearly. Data lakehouses, though they're not yet mainstream in the enterprise, a convergence of the data warehouse with the data lake. We see more of a push increasingly for enterprises to combine these different platforms to support applications that require workloads that are both analytics but also data science. Multi-model databases, containerized data platforms, data meshes. These are approaches that are up and coming, and our panelists will discuss them in just a moment. New data pipeline architecture, XOps, that's the convergence of DataOps, data engineering, with machine learning operationalization. We did a best practices study this past year, TWI, on the convergence of these pipelines as an enabler for productization of ever more sophisticated, data-driven AI and machine learning applications. Automation of data integration is clearly an unstoppable trend, and we're seeing lots of progress in that area. New data governance models, unification of data and model governance. It's part of the whole phenomenon of the convergence of the DataOps and MLOps pipelines. But also very much the cloud data catalog has become a preeminent platform for data governance and data curation and the like. So definitely that's what's ahead in the coming years. New data modeling approaches, they're not brand new, like graph data. It's been around for several years, but it remains a vital approach for supporting core use cases in areas such as semantic web and the Internet of Things. Hyperledger data, increasingly immutable data logs. We see a lot of that uptake in the business or B2B commerce and other applications. Synthetic data, which is on some level is a model. It's not so much a data modeling approach in the same way that graph is, but it's essentially it's a new approach for generating good enough, as it were, ersatz data from using machine learning models as a core capability to drive various use cases in the MLOps domain. We see, of course, a greater push towards automation of data engineering and every other pipeline function, as well as increasingly to enable autonomous data platforms to self-tune and so forth. So AI and ML are increasingly getting ever more effective at automating with full fidelity workloads that require less and less manual human supervision, though that's still quite important in many use cases. And last but not least, in terms of what's ahead in data management, data marketplaces are coming along fast and furious as a place for organizations, enterprises to both acquire the data and the machine learning models and other digital assets they need for their analytics applications and the like, but also as a secure medium for organizations to go to market with their own data products. In fact, in the coming year, TDWI, we are going to be doing a best practices study on data productization as a key new enterprise best practice. So that's what we're seeing, but we all want to hear what the panel is seeing. So I'm going to hand it back to Andrew, and Andrew can introduce our panelists.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Jim, for that great presentation. Before I introduce our panelists, just a quick reminder to our audience that if you have a question, you can enter it at any time in the Ask a Question window. We'll be answering audience questions in the final portion of the program. Our first panelist today is Madhup Mishra with Hitachi Vantara. He is the Senior Director of Product Marketing at Hitachi and drives product marketing for Lumada DataOps and Industrial DataOps portfolio businesses. With 20-plus years of enterprise software experience, Madhup covers a wide range of topics, including data operations, big data analytics, data governance, and the Internet of Things. Our next panelist is Colin Dover with SAP. Colin is the Senior Director for the Business Technology Platform Center of Excellence at SAP. And as a part of that, Colin represents a breadth of solutions within SAP's portfolio. He is an evangelist for the SAP digital transformation strategy and vision, as well as passionate advocate for the value and best practices of corporate customer data strategy and analytics capability maturity. He has held a variety of technical and strategic consulting roles at a number of market-leading enterprise software vendors, gaining extensive experience over a 22-year period, working with many of the world's leading corporations. Our final panelist today is Chris Santiago with Unravel Data. Chris is the Global Vice President of the Solutions Engineering team at Unravel, helping customers manage and optimize some of the most complex modern data stacks in the world. Previously, he spent over a dozen years as a solution architect creating enterprise data applications. His multifaceted experience in the data ops domain allows Chris to help customers get the most out of their data applications and infrastructure. Please welcome Madhup, Colin, and Chris. And with that, Jim, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Andrew, and hello, panelists. Nice to have you, gentlemen, on the panel today. So over the next half hour or so, I'm going to ask you, all three of you, a set of questions, and really any one of you may step in and respond first. It's up to you. I'm not going to call you by name. You all have equally valid insights, so let's get rolling. And what's ahead in data management is such a broad topic. I thought I would sort of conduct today's panel by asking kind of pointed questions that are highly specific, hopefully not so too specific that you'll need to give monosyllabic responses, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. And we'd like to hear your minds at work on these topics in the future of data management. So I'll start with this one. Enterprise data catalogs, they're becoming more important. They're being adopted more avidly by enterprise data and analytics professionals. So how likely is the adoption of the enterprise data catalog likely to catalyze evolution of data stewardship, likely to catalyze the roles, responsibilities, and workloads of data stewards? I mean, are data catalogs changing the very face of data governance, and if so, how?
Thanks for having me on this panel here. This is Madhu Mishra from Hitachi Vantara. Yeah, data catalogs are awesome, right? They're new upcoming. They help you discover, understand your data, get the quality of data, right? Know the meaning behind that data, uncover hidden relationships, et cetera, right? So I think this is a new and upcoming field, and we're seeing a lot of our customers sort of creating their centralized intelligence strategy using an enterprise-wide data catalog. A lot of times we find that customers, based on project or use case or line of business, have more than one data catalog in the environment as well, right? The idea remains the same. Not everybody outside of application owners and data stewards have a good understanding of data holistically, and the catalogs help, provide that semantic layer that helps others understand what the data is all about. I think the adoption of these data catalog capabilities hinges fundamentally on this notion of it being adopted in the data culture of the company, right? So it goes above and beyond just data stewards using this as a tool to make their jobs easier, although this certainly helps them do that, right? With the AI and ML, it does help the stewards provide the supervised learning that you really need for the environment. However, the catalogs are going to be useless if they aren't more widely adopted within the organization, where people feel they need to come to this tool, they need to come to this water cooler to understand and collaborate on data, right? Because everyone comes from a different angle. They have a different meaning to that data that they can help enrich this data together beyond just the stewards.
Let me clarify something. When you say supervised learning in this context, you're not referring to a machine learning approach. You're referring to guidance based on data-driven analytics as surfaced through the catalog. Is that correct?
Yeah. I meant both. I definitely meant what you said, but I'm also finding, especially our data, Hitachi Vantara's data catalog, part of Lumada DataOps portfolio, uses AI and ML under the covers, right, and makes these recommendations for data stewards to look at, and them to sort of either agree with their recommendation or say that that's not, and that goes back in the training process as well, right? But I mean more generally as well.
Okay. Well, Chris or Colin, what do you have to say on this topic?
Yeah, I'll go next. So Chris Santiago again. Thanks for having me on this panel. I think data catalogs in practice are great. I think for anybody in a company to really understand what's this data, what's the definition, if there's multiple ways to interpret the data, it's a great way to just have a centralized location. That's in theory, though. I think that, in order to have, a great data catalog, as Madhu had mentioned, I mean, it's really about, do you have the right practices in place to, ultimately curate this data catalog? Just to add just some other complexities to the discussion is, you also have, other folks that play in this data catalog space. You also have data that's all over the place, right? Could be some stuff that's been on-prem, could be in the cloud, could be folks that are, further in their journey in this, hybrid cloud approach. And so, trying to get all of that together, that's more of a combination of technology, obviously from a data catalog perspective, but then who's actually owning this and making sure that we do have this unified catalog that's going to make sense for the business.
Right. Colin, your thoughts? Is
You're on
Colin's
mute.
microphone on? Colin, you're on mute.
There we go. Hopefully you can hear me now. Thank you.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
all the signs were that I was off mute, but obviously it wasn't. I was just saying thank you both for breaking the ice here. I'm always reminded of Niels Bohr and the statement that predictions are difficult, especially when they relate to the future. So I think this is an interesting conversation for sure. My honest hope is that with the evolution of catalogs, the adoption of catalogs in a more meaningful and I'd say broadly encompassing manner, that the data steward's role becomes a little less thankless than it has been in the past. I feel like data stewards have had a pretty tough time over the last decade or so, as long as that role has existed. From a data strategy standpoint, I hear a lot of customers who are describing what one labeled as the pedigree of data being something that they really want to begin to understand fully within the organization, and that leads to trust in the decision-making process supported by data. And I think that's where, without getting into the specific sort of attributes of what the data catalog could evolve to be over the coming years, I think that combination of ability to track KPIs and look at the management of lineage and the context of business data that's being leveraged in that catalog, the profiling, and then ultimately harvesting data about the data that's being used and the way that it's being used. I think all of those go to that desire to achieve some level of assurance that there is pedigree in the data, that there is a usage that's being made by the business that's responsible, sustainable, and ultimately is helping support the goal of the organization. I think that's, from a philosophical standpoint, that's what I'm hoping will come of the emergence catalogs over time.
Yeah, the data steward shows the pedigree of the data. Yeah, I'm sorry, one of the other panelists? Okay, we'll move on to the next question because we have limited time, but we have some other meaty questions. So will enterprises be able to completely automate the DataOps pipeline by the end of this decade, or is that a dangerous hope or a naive hope?
I see you've picked up these a little bit on the edge because of going with the theme of this prediction, right? It's a bold statement. We at Hitachi, we have done surveys of over 600 CDOs over the past year, and we're finding that this term DataOps is, at least over the last few years, has become more and more mainstream. Where we find over 65% of the customers we're talking to are either actively pursuing new ways of agile data management, your data CI/CD, if not calling it DataOps, right? So, we analysts and vendors get into putting nice labels on things, right? DevOps and DevSecOps and MLOps. Customers slightly think differently, right? So we see that. However, the problem still remains, right? Most of the CDOs talk about how their companies or their teams are spending over half their time on just preparing data and, getting it to a spot where they can start to use it, right? The problems of lots of data silos has only gotten worse, right? With cloud, there's more now, right? And there's multi-cloud as well, right? So that's definitely there. Of course, each tool comes with its own integration capabilities, right? Everyone wants their own tool to do the ETL along with it, right? So CDOs are pulling their hair out, right? They're trying to sort of figure out how they can put in a practice in place that's more common and standardized across the organization, right? Have data to be more automated, but sort of having to deal with this, more evolving and complex landscape, right? One of Hitachi's large customers, top 10 banks in New York City, their CDO got fed up of all these different teams starting to, do their own thing on the side. And he put his foot down and said, there's one standard platform to bring in all data and clean it and prepare it and get it analyzed and produced. and we're going to offer it as a service to the whole organization. And what that did was it helped streamline the process. Of course, there was a lot of whining and complaining from various teams not being able to use their tool. However, what it did was they were able to accelerate analytics much faster through the pipeline, right? They were able to sort of roll that out to 10 plus business units. 150 custom apps were built on it, right? Within weeks, every day they process millions of lines of code through that system. So we believe that there is a lot of value around automated pipelines. However, I don't see the need for supervision, the need for collaboration, the need for observability, the need for CI/CD, the people aspect of it coming together, going away anytime soon, right? So it's not like you're gonna lights out data center, you're gonna shut it off and go off to a different direction.
Right, Colin or Chris, your thoughts on automation of the pipeline?
I went second last time, so I'll let you do it, Colin.
All right, thank you. So, well, we're now truly in the territory of futurology here, Jim. I think by the end of the decade, I think it's absolutely possible that the automation of data operations could take place. I think if we look to the more immediate future, for a lot of customers that I've been working with this year on their data strategies, I think the expectation is that there is a better understanding of the processes within their business. There is more of a potential to operationalize the use of data in a way that they haven't done in the past. And I think that, that's partly about looking at a combination of not just the solutions at play, but the obviously the inherent processes, but really looking at culturally what the organization does with data, how it does it with, what it does with that data, and what it's supporting in terms of the outcomes. And I think, there's a lot of opportunity to identify efficiencies. I think from that identification of efficiencies, there's an opportunity to automate. And I certainly see customers who are looking at the promise of AI and ML as a way of achieving that. So by the end of the decade, possibly, I think in the coming year or so, just going through those motions of really understanding what makes most sense to put in those data operations and automate is where the focus would be.
Great, Chris.
Yeah, stretch goal, but likely not. I think that the ideal state, you have customers that want to automate this whole process. I mean, if you talk about it, it's really just, set it and forget it is kind of like where people are trying to get to. But like the reality is, customers are choosing multiple services off of multiple clouds, right? So, the winner of that hasn't yet been decided, right? Or if it ever will be, right? I'm sure there's going to be new technology that's going to pop up, by the end of the decade that's going to change the game. But, and so, you've got that stack is growing. And plus, you've got the cloud vendors themselves that are trying to also play this game as well, right? The other thing too is like with this emergence of new tech, Madhu, you mentioned the people, aspect. I mean, that's a big thing, right? Some of this technology that's coming out is, the vendors try to make it very easy to use, and things such as like low code or try to abstract as much complexities away from that standpoint. But it is pretty new, right? So you don't really have lots of subject matter experts right out there to define things such as like best practices or center of excellences, right? And so the ideal state to try to automate everything from a DataOps pipeline, yeah, that's great. But in reality, I think that just the fact of customers are going to choose what they want to use. There's no clear winner on where to go from that standpoint. Plus, this is just growing, and actually finding the right people to staff up to actually do these these implementations correctly is really what's going to prevent folks from fully automating this process anytime soon.
Right. Okay, so data engineers out there, your jobs are relatively safe from automation. So we move on to the next topic, really in terms of disruptive trends. Will the adoption of visual low-code data engineering tools enable the so-called citizen data scientists, the new data scientists who don't necessarily have an academic background in data science. We'll enable them to do more of their data engineering, the DataOps, ETL, et cetera, unassisted. Really, how powerful will the new generation of data scientists be in terms of doing data engineering without any actual inputs or assistance from professional data engineers going forward? So any of you have any thoughts on this?
I'm happy to go first on this one. I think the whole low-code, no-code conversation is an interesting one. I mean, I see from the customers I've spoken to this year about their expectations for what low-code will enable. I think it comes down to potential alleviation of skills shortages. I think, as you say, Jim, the citizen data scientist, that evolving, emerging role, it fully supports that. It also possibly helps with the perennial challenge of shadow IT, and I think that's where some of the the plus sides are. The other thing I've also heard, quite candidly, is that low code is not expected necessarily to be a full alternative or replacement for classic data science development cycles. And so, that's, I think, the balance that we need to strike, and certainly in trying to help customers build what their future state looks like, that's the way I think we're viewing that.
Sure. Madhu or Chris, anybody want to share a few thoughts on this?
Chris, do you want me to go, or you?
I'll take second on this again. I mean, it's all good. Thank you. So, I do think it opens up the conversation to folks that maybe would have been shut out because maybe there was some technical challenges to achieve the initiatives that they were looking to do with data, right? So it definitely opens this up to a broader audience, while just abstracting away some of the technical knowledge that you would need to build out these products. But I think, there definitely is a balancing act, right? Because at the end of the day, what low code is doing is it is making a bunch of assumptions, right? In terms of configuration, at Unravel Data, we have many customers that deal with a lot of this technology, and really, even though it might make it easy for the business, for example, to go ahead and create their ML algorithms or whatever they're doing from a process standpoint, someone at the back end still does need to do things such as like tuning, configuring, if it's in the cloud, being mindful of cost. So while it's great that it is opening up the doors for other folks to start doing some really great things with data, it doesn't necessarily solve everything, right? Because someone at the end of the day does need to do some sort of cleanup from that. And really the best teams that have a good combination of leveraging tools such as, that provide low code features is they have an effective DataOps practice behind to ensure that everything is, performance, quality, and cost.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah. So I totally agree with Chris. I think as you roll out these low code, no code tools, which I believe are getting to a point where citizen data science professionals and business analysts can start to sort of consume it on their own, the need for governance and policy and basic data hygiene and cost and risk, et cetera, doesn't go away, right? So the central IT's job, the data team's job becomes even more interesting in this type of future, right? But I still feel like we're starting to scratch the surface. Just because you have the tools doesn't mean you will get to a point where you will become like fully self-sufficient, right? And a lot of it is to, people all operate in silos, right? Functional silos within the companies, and each functional silo has its own application, and context around that application is tribal to that application team, right? So as you're trying to build your AI models, you're trying to become more self-sufficient, you need to have better data literacy, right? And awareness around all data, right? Contextualized across the whole organization, the entire enterprise. And having sort of, again, going back to the catalog conversation becomes even more paramount here, right? Because what are you going to pull in this tool if you don't know if it exists, right? You don't know what you don't know, right? So how do you become more smarter about, metadata around data existing elsewhere? and what options do you have to pull in a tool like this, right? So definitely literacy is key. Catalog is definitely paramount there. But also, to Chris's point, or the whole catalog also helps with the governing aspect of it, right? So you can apply the policies and make sure that somebody's not violating your AWS quota because they spun up something that they shouldn't have on the side.
Okay, great. We'll move on to the next question. Clearly, the Cloud Data Catalog is becoming a core pillar for enterprise data governance. What's the next step in the evolution of Cloud Data Catalogs in support of governance? Trustworthiness, curation, data security, data discoverability. What's next? What role will the Cloud Data Catalog assume in coming years that it's not yet fully supporting in terms of core enterprise use cases? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, we've talked about catalog quite a lot, right? So I think some of these points may be covered elsewhere, but I feel the catalog, it will become more and more of an enabling technology as opposed to the tool that people need to go to, right? In this journey towards data intelligence and becoming smarter about the data, right? Knowing more about the data. So I think that's definitely the direction we're headed in, meaning, having a passive catalog or I guess multiple catalogs in many large enterprises is only the start of the journey, right? What do you do with that data? How do you activate that data? Will definitely be more needs to happen in that regard, right? How do you take that and do something with it? For example, I am a big healthcare institution. I have all this data. My catalog figured out that I have all this data that needs to effectively can be stored in a cheaper medium or a more compliant medium. Can I intelligently now move the data to that tier, for example, right? So there are more things. What do you do with that intelligence? So all kinds of use cases will start to become available, in context of, governance, but also in context of cost avoidance and efficiencies as well. So I feel like there's a lot more that'll happen in those areas. I also feel that we haven't talked much about unstructured data, right? So as much we have in rows and columns, we have 100 times more in PDFs and Word documents and other data sets, right? So these catalogs need to become smart and bring in a lot of unstructured data and semi-structured information as well, right? So people can now more holistically search across the entire enterprise and not just sort of focus on, the smaller structured data sets size.
Right. Chris or Colin?
Yeah, so I mean, nothing much more to add than, to what's been stated, other than the fact of, what we'll see is bringing this more to the masses, right? Folks that may have wanted to do something with data and didn't really have, didn't really understand how the data was laid out or where you'd even find the data. So yeah, I think what this is ultimately going to do is just bring more users to start doing cool things with data. And so I'm all for it.
Right. Colin?
Yeah, and I think that, well, as has already been said, I think, we've maybe touched on this already, but I think the main next step is for it to actually be holistic. The challenge of governance has been, I would say, as much of an underscoring factor to every program that I've witnessed with customers, whether successful or otherwise. And I think that whole idea of what is the truthiness of the data that the business community is using, is really the ultimate litmus test for the business. So whether it's a historically an on-prem deployment or it's a cloud deployment, whether it's a highly fragmented and I would say disparate environment, as we've seen in the past on-prem, or it's now bridging the cloud and on-prem. I think that the problem in many ways characteristically doesn't change a great deal. There's still an awful lot of need and opportunity to create trust for the user community, and governance is probably the fastest way to it. So just becoming holistic. And I think, a big part of this is the next step being culturally organizations understanding the value of governance. I've just spent the last 2 days in a room with 12 CDOs, and they all point to this as their biggest single challenge, that the communication of why governance matters is something that is a tremendous hurdle. So I think that's where I'd leave this one.
Okay. So moving on, so cloud data catalogs are becoming the centerpiece of cloud marketplaces. And what TDWI is seeing, cloud marketplaces are becoming a very important platform for bringing data products to market. So I'm going to ask my panelists, when, if ever, will enterprises rely on cloud data marketplaces as their principal channels for productizing and monetizing their data products? Or is that wishful thinking? I mean, can data analytics programs in the enterprise become self-funding through the intermediary of cloud marketplaces to help you cash in? Your thoughts?
So I think we're...
You have to accept my point of view here, by the way. Put it back.
No worries. Yeah. I think we're still in the early days of this, right? Where folks, at least the customers that we're seeing, are starting to dip in their toes. More proof of concepts, obviously some more advanced than others, right? I do think it is something that does have legs. I mean, at the end of the day, at its core, it's really making it easy for folks who want to start doing something with data, right? Making it easy for them to go ahead and bring in some data, and hey, better yet, let's actually do some collaboration with some other folks and doing it in a way that is secure, right? And we're not giving away too much information about, the core data, right? So I think it's still in its infancy. I do think that there's promise of this, right? Of customers really starting to take advantages and monetize it. It's just too early so far, at least in my mind, in my opinion, with what I see with my customers, to see how much we can actually monetize this as the years go on.
Right. Madhu or Colin?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in, Madhu, if you are. I think I don't know, as a principal channel for productizing and monetization of data, that's a to be seen. I think what's been interesting and is interesting going into next year and the immediate future is that this idea of cloud marketplaces allows for supplemental use of data. It's filling the gaps where they exist in the data landscape. And again, referring to most recent experience with CDO discussions, it really comes down to a realization through the last 2 years that there isn't necessarily a complete landscape of data available within the organization, but there's also tremendously valuable data that could be monetized and provisioned externally. So I think that data product discussion is one that's gaining momentum. I think between COVID and looking at external stock influencing factors, the big trend around ESG and the fact that's on the lips of every board member and C-level exec currently. We move towards the quarter and mid-century. I think questions are being asked about where do we find that data. And so the marketplace offers an opportunity there, but also the realization that data is one of the most valuable assets within any organization, and its monetization is, if not embraced, missing a significant opportunity.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you. I totally yes. So I agree with both the comments that have been said here. I think we should look at marketplaces as a way to not just monetize, but also share applications and data, right? So in some sense, you should also think of internal marketplaces and external marketplaces, right? So, while Amazon and AWS and GCP and Azure, et cetera, are great, and by the way, Hitachi is partners with all of them, they're not the only game in town, right? So there's all kinds of marketplaces that are coming up with lots of different companies, some internal and others external, where we're starting to see tools and applications being talked about, shared, right? Hitachi has our own project that's going on, and internally we're trying to do that internally. It's going to become external at some point in time as well, right? So I feel like it's a journey, whether we'll get to being able to monetize all their data products and have in a sustaining fashion. It depends on the use case. It might not be possible for a lot of them, right? But that shouldn't stop them from sharing it within the company, right? So I think there's a lot of value there. I think the other thing here is two more things to think about. I think it also brings in this notion of open ecosystem and APIs to front and center, right? As you put things in marketplaces where you need to sort of think through not proprietary protocols, but ways for you to have, we are all cogs in the wheel, right? So you plug into a larger ecosystem, and how this your app will fit into something else that the customer already have in their data stack becomes interesting. But for companies that are on this panel, it's also about ISV and partnerships, right? From our standpoint, right, where we can offer more holistic solutions, right? For example, Hitachi is a key partner from SAP is a key partner for Hitachi, right? So we're certifying SAP HANA on our storage systems. Our software connectors work with SAP databases, et cetera. So we need to think of it as you'll never be the only application or solution in town, right? So how do you plug into a broader ecosystem and then sort of have it be available in the marketplace, right? Both internal and external.
Okay, so in the interest of time, we'll move on to the next. I took a supply side point of view on that previous question in terms of companies selling their data and analytics, data-driven products through marketplaces. I'm taking kind of a demand side perspective on this question. You mentioned internal data marketplace is a very important channel for acquiring data sets from throughout the organization for your data project. We're seeing at TDWI and a growth in the use of synthetic data, which is basically machine-generated data for a variety of applications, primarily in machine learning operations. So that sort of, to me, suggests there may be a day when synthetic data becomes a predominant piece of the overall data estate that you manage and store in places like your data lake. So will the day ever come when enterprise data lakes are primarily full of synthetic data, not authentic source data? What are your thoughts?
So James, if I tell you that Tesla autopilot feature was never tested on a real road and ask you to sit in that car and go across George Washington Bridge in Manhattan, what would you feel like? Right.
Well, the experience then of doing that was entirely simulated in advance. So it's like I'm writing in a simulation that my life depends on. So I hope it works.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like there's, of course, a time and place for synthetic data. It's becoming more and more prominent as it relates to ML training models and things of that nature. But before you put anything in production, right, as you look at this entire machine learning operationalization, you're going to want to test with things that your customers are actually generating, data sets that are real, right, to make sure that the latencies are under control, the predictability is high, right, and all of those things are sort of headed in the right direction, right? So from that standpoint, I don't see it going entirely synthetic unless it's some sort of game. It's going to
right.
entirely feasible.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm going to agree with Madhu wholeheartedly on that and just say there's definitely a place for it, but and I mean for rapid learning and testing of ML-based analytics or use cases, undoubtedly, absolutely that is a valuable application. Okay. But yes, I think we need to see real world representation of the data and how that reflects the reality of what's playing out.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, make me number 3. I totally agree on all the points that were made here. I do think it should be used as support at tech, right? I mean, it also brings up questions of like, okay, we've got some synthetic data here. How was it actually created? What models were used for that? So it does open up more questions. That maybe it's the sense of not being worth it, right? Especially in a productionalized setting. The other thing to keep in mind too is that this is so new. There's also regulatory repercussions as well, right? So the laws, legislation, also dependent on the country that you live in. hasn't fully been defined. And so, there could be some issues from that standpoint. So, it is powerful in terms of like, especially in MLOps scenarios, but I do think, keep it more in your development environment, not production today.
Right. And our last question before we move to the audience Q&A, we've seen an upsurge in responsible data and analytics as a broad paradigm or set of concerns, addressing everything from ethics to sustainability and diversity, inclusion, AI safety, and so forth. Right now, TDWI is undertaking a market survey to get a sense for how enterprises are addressing these new challenges, these new stakeholders and outcomes in their data practices. So how will the advent of, say, data ethics and sustainability and other concerns like this, how will it change how enterprises organize data stewardship? Will we have data ethics people in our data governance practice, or is data ethics and all these other concerns something that's peripheral or tangential to data stewardship going forward? Thoughts?
Again, happy to jump in on this one. I see an awful lot of interest, as recently as yesterday, around leading strategy development with the formation of an AI ethics framework. I think there's an expectation that AI is probably one of the most problematic issues that we've had to deal with in terms of how we manage its role within the data landscape and ultimately the decisions that are made from it. So I think those ethical issues and you then underscore all of this with the last 2 years that we've all experienced, where it's very clear that we move quickly from a tradition of almost P&L based reporting to reporting that makes assumptions that we will probably experience another pandemic of a similar nature or greater within the next 5 to 7 years. How do we start to think about our responsible use of data in the face of that? What do we do with, as I say, the hottest topic seemingly of all at the moment, which is ESG? And there are, I would say, in the nearly 25 years I've been in the space, there's more pointers towards socioeconomic and the global aspects of that in the data discussion than ever before.
Right.
So I think it's going to change the stewardship role considerably.
So Chris or Madhu, any thoughts?
I mean, I would put a different lens on it as well. I mean, all valid points there, Colin. If you look at mission statements from companies itself, it's definitely changing to be in with the times, with whatever's going on with society today. There's always a thirst for the new talent, right? So, I do see, at least with some of our customers, the newer folks, the folks that are coming in, they do care about a lot of these things, things such as like sustainability, environment, and so on and so forth. And so, when it comes to attracting some of this talent to the folks that, want to be part of your culture from an organization perspective, then yes, you do want to start aligning that. And I think, over time we will start seeing that have downstream effects in terms of, data stewardship. But yes, I do think that, as more of the newer generation comes into the industry, they're going to bring in their thoughts and how we should be handling things such as data privacy, AI, so on and so forth. And you'll start seeing that permutate throughout the organizations over the years.
Okay, Madhu, any thoughts before we
Sounds
go to
good. I'll keep
audience
it brief.
Q&A?
In the interest of time, I'll keep it brief. I think that we talked about self-service and democratization of data, and I feel like, bringing more people into the AI and ML and analytics fold will inherently make it more diversified, right? So, I mean, I'm not saying the data and analytics team is biased or anything like that, but the more people that come into the thinking, the more people analyzing, looking at the data, makes it that much more sort of balanced from a from a company or organization standpoint, from an ethics standpoint, right? So that's definitely there. I see the role of ethics and et cetera evolving and becoming a part of the central governance framework that can be applied through all kinds of different sort of architectures, right? You mentioned data meshes where there could be a person in each of the different domains, but a central governing body that sort of oversees the policies that need to be put in place. So just leave it at that.
Very good, Madhu. Thank you. So Andrew, I'm going to hand it back to you for the audience Q&A. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you all for that great discussion. We'll move to the audience questions here now. We'll start off with a question for Chris. Chris, organizations increasingly talk about data products. What are some examples of data products and how DataOps apply to data products?
That's a good question. So the data products which power today's companies range from advanced analytics, data pipelines, and machine learning models to embedded AI solutions. So using a DataOps methodology allows companies to move faster, more surely, and with greater cost effectiveness in extracting value out of data.
Fantastic. We'll move on to the next question here. Colin, I'll ask this of you. Has data mesh replaced data fabric as the next major architectural trend?
Has it replaced it? Well, I think it maybe in terms of sort of the timing and the advent of the mesh conversation, it means we're moving straight beyond data fabric as something for a lot of organizations that becomes a reality. I have a number of customer organizations I work with who variously refer to mesh, fabrics, tapestries. One a few weeks ago talked about the American quilt of data that they have. And I think it all points to the same vision, which is the integration of the varying threads of data that exist within the landscape, whether it's still on-prem or it's moving to the cloud. And the fact is the mesh is more decentralized in its nature. But I think a lot of what we've covered today really does talk to the what would be the inherent characteristics and attributes of effective mesh architecture. So has it replaced it? I don't think it's replaced it, but I think a lot of companies are now looking to the future evolution, which is mesh.
Fantastic. We'll move on to the next question here. Madhu, this one's for you. Hitachi is big in sustainability. What trends do you see in data analytics around sustainability?
Yeah. So I feel like where Hitachi has been delving in sustainability and green and all these initiatives for a while, we take sustainability very seriously, right? So we have a two-pronged approach, right? So we have sustainable infrastructure from our standpoint. The hardware and the server and storage platforms that we provide are, certified, green and, help customers get to more carbon neutrality to whatever, pledge they're looking to consider over time. We're seeing lots of CDOs and CIOs asking us about these type of capabilities. But it's also about data intelligence, right? You need to be smart about the data. You can't be storing 10 copies of the data, right? So to be more responsive in terms of sustainability, you need to know your data and understand your data and get rid of garbage data and tier it and do the basic hygiene that's needed for you to be more sustainable in the future. So we're seeing a lot of efforts on both ends, right? Customers looking to from a hardware standpoint, get a bit more sustainable, but also look at our software products and to help that further their sustainability goals. And lots of success stories. I know we're going to be up on our time, so I'm not going to name one, but there's quite a few stories where customers have started to successfully do that with Hitachi.
Fantastic. There was a couple questions around this, something that we just touched on at the beginning of the panel discussion. So I'm going to ask it of all three of you. Perhaps, Chris, you can start, and then whoever would like to go next would be fine. So based on all your experience, the main attributes that should be in a catalog, what are the main attributes that should be in catalogs that will help users the most?
Yeah, kind of going back to what I said previously, I think it's really just understanding the business, understanding, what's actually in my data today. That data stewardship or that data steward role is very important in making sure that we capture that the right way, because really, it's like first impressions, right? We want to make sure that as we roll this out, I have something that's trustworthy for folks to start really getting value out of this. So I would start there to make sure that, we're doing things as right as we can to begin with.
Yeah. From my standpoint, it's all about automatic profiling of data, right? Using AI and ML, right? Building your business glossary of terms, applying policies to help you with your data quality needs, any sensitive data protection needs, being able to, discover meaning and take command of your data.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I think we talked about this earlier, but the notion of lineage and understanding where the data came from, what happened to it to get to where it is, and what ultimately it will support in the context of the business question that you have. So I think, without going over time, those are probably the main attributes.
All right. Thank you, all of you, very much for your time today. It was a fantastic discussion. We do appreciate everyone's time here. And, of course, the questions that we didn't get to in the audience Q&A, we will try to get those answers to you as soon as possible. But this does come to the end of our time, so let me thank Jim Kobielus, who spoke from TDWI, Madhu Mishra with Hitachi Vantara, Colin Dover with SAP, and Chris Santiago with Unravel Data. I would also like to thank Hitachi, SAP, and Unravel for sponsoring today's webinar. And please remember that we did record today's webinar. We'll be emailing you a link to an archived version of the presentation, which you can feel free to share with colleagues as you'd like. Also, don't forget that we have a copy of today's presentation, and in order to access that, you can use the click here for a PDF line. Finally, I'd like to remind you that TDWI offers a wealth of information, including the latest research, reports, and webinars about BI, data warehousing, and a host of related topics. So I encourage you to tap into that expertise at tdwi.org. Lastly, from all of us here, let me say thank you very much for attending. This does conclude today's event.
Thank you.